Thanksgiving of 2009 began like any other family trip. Families from all across America gathered around tables, carving up turkeys, laughing and giving thanks. For John Edward Jones, a 26-year-old medical student, husband and father, this holiday was special. He'd returned home to Utah, the place where he'd grown up, and he'd brought with him his wife Emily and their 13-month-old daughter. John was the kind of man that people admired. He was tall, athletic, religious, and always smiling. He had plans for a long career in medicine and dreams of raising his young family. But he also had a love for adventure, and back in Utah there was one adventure calling his name, the Nutty Putty Cave. Nutty Putty wasn't just a cave, it was a local legend. Carved deep into the Utah desert, about 55 miles away from Salt Lake City, this cave was famous and infamous. Unlike the wide, cathedral-like caverns most people imagine when they hear the word cave, Nutty Putty was a labyrinth, full of narrow tunnels and suffocating passageways. Its name came from the sticky, clay-like mud that coated the walls and clung to clothes like wet cement. Some of the passages had names that almost mocked their danger. The Scout Eater, the Birth Canal, the Aorta Crawl. Each one was a challenge, a dare for someone who dared to squeeze into the tight caverns. Each one of these was a dare for those who craved tight squeezes and claustrophobic thrills. And John, who had done some caving before, thought he was ready. So on November 24th of 2009, John, his brother Josh, and a group of friends set out to explore Nutty Putty. They weren't reckless teenagers. They were grown men, husbands, students, young fathers. To them, it wasn't about being careless. It was simply about testing themselves and facing something that few would ever dare to attempt. And at first, everything was fine. The group crawled through the cold, muddy corridors, their headlamps bouncing beams off of the light and damp limestone walls. They laughed, joked, squeezed through the passages, and mapped out their route. For John, it was exhilarating. But then he saw it. A narrow tunnel sloping downwards. He thought he recognized it as the Birth Canal, a famous squeeze that, whilst tight, was passable. It was a kind of challenge cavers boasted about afterwards, proof of courage and skill. So John decided to go first. The passage was brutal, barely 10 inches high, 18 inches wide. He lay flat on his stomach, arms pinned to his sides, and began worming forwards, inch by inch. His chest scraped the rock below, his back pressed above the stone above. Every breath felt smaller, but he still pushed forwards. But what John didn't know is, this wasn't the Birth Canal. This was an uncharted crevice, even narrower, sloping downwards into the darkness. And soon enough, John would realize his mistake. Halfway through, his body slid down into a funnel-shaped shaft, head first. His arms jammed awkwardly beneath him, his chest compressed against stone. He began trying to back up, but gravity pulled him deeper and deeper. He kicked, he twisted and strained, but nothing worked. He was stuck. Not just stuck, but trapped upside down. John's brother Josh came quickly, trying to help. But the sight was horrifying. John's body wedged vertically in a shaft, only big enough for a human torso, his head pointing downwards into the abyss below. Feet towards the surface. Once Josh grabbed the severity of the situation, he panicked. He grabbed John's ankles, pulled him with all his strength, but John just did not budge. The rock had him in a vice. It was 9 p.m. when Josh crawled back to go for help, but by then John had been stuck for nearly an hour. Fortunately, rescuers soon arrived, experienced cavers, paramedics and firefighters, all lowering themselves hundreds of feet underground into the twisting passages of the Nutty Putty Cave. What they found was worse than what they imagined. John was 370 feet into the cave. To reach him, rescuers had to crawl through the same suffocating tunnels, dragging gear by hand. When they finally saw him, wedged upside down, they realized the danger wasn't just in the cave walls, it was in time. The human body cannot survive long upside down, and blood rushed to John's head, his lungs compressed under the weight of his organs. Every minute, oxygen ran thinner, his heart strained. Rescuers had to act fast. They set up pulley systems, ropes and anchors. Pulleys bolted to the cave walls, designed to lift John out inch by inch. For hours, they worked in the cold darkness, and John was brave, speaking to them, telling jokes, even praying with them. He asked about his wife, he asked about his baby daughter. He told rescuers that he wanted to get out and see his family again. At one point the pulley began to work. They moved him several inches upwards. Hope surged. He might actually make it. But then, disaster. A key anchor drilled into the wall had failed. The system snapped and John slid back down, deeper into the crevice, wedged tighter than even before. By now, John had been stuck for nearly 19 hours and his breath was growing shallow. His words began to become slurred. Rescuers tried to speak softly to keep him calm. He whispered his love for his family. His brother Josh, just feet away, could only watch helplessly. Hours stretched into the night. Hope began to fade, and doctors on the surface warned that John's body just could not take much longer. The pressure on his organs, the pooling blood in his brain, the crushing rock was all a deadly combination. Finally, after more than 24 hours trapped, John's voice began to grow quiet. His pulse slowed, and then he was gone. Rescuers were devastated. They had risked everything, crawled through hell itself, and still they couldn't save him. In the days that followed, authorities debated how to retrieve John's body, but the truth was very clear. It was basically impossible. The tunnel was too narrow, the risks too high. To attempt recovery would endanger more lives, so they made a haunting decision. Nutty Putty Cave would be sealed forever, and John's body would remain inside, entombed into the rock, 370 feet below the earth. Concrete then filled the entrance, closing it off to anybody who may ever try again. Today, the Nutty Putty Cave is silent. No one goes in, no one comes out. Beneath the Utah desert, John Edward Jones rests where he fell, a stark reminder of the power in nature and the fine line between adventure and potential tragedy. The most sad part about the story is that John left behind a wife and a daughter and a son who would never get to meet him, born months after his death. His story is told not as a warning against courage, but a warning against underestimating the earth itself, because sometimes the cave does not let go. John's tragic story is another example of what can happen underground in caves. Taking precautions and being careful in these environments is exceptionally important, and the Nutty Putty Cave disaster is yet another example which shows this.